Christianity has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and not tried. Chesterton.
And now your host, Brock Lawby.
What did you think of CPAC? What was your thoughts this year?
I really felt like watching all the speakers, even being in the hub and seeing all the vendors in there, this year it much more shaped my view and who I think I'm going to vote for come 2016.
So it had a huge political imprint on you then?
It really did.
Can you focus on that? I'd really love to hear about that.
A couple things really influenced me. First and foremost, Phil Robertson's speech, awesome. I mean,
it was. It really was.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think stole the show and really had a convincing argument. You know, I really thought the underlying message he was trying to get across was, hey, conservatives, you guys are always preaching, hey, we gotta follow the Constitution, and you're always preaching like, hey, what would the founding fathers do? You know, and always talking about how the founding fathers are role models and things like that. And really so, but he really kind of called us out on that, and I thought that was really cool. He really called us out and said, "Hey, look,"
and literally preached not only their words to us, but God's word, right?
Exactly, and amazingly, those things coincided very well, you know, and so that really got me thinking, and really, I think, shifted my opinion, or maybe really who I think I'm going to actually pull the handle for come election time to maybe, a more religiously centered candidate, or more Christian candidate.
And we've talked about this. We touched on this a little bit as friends, but why is that? Like overall, I mean, and by the way, just as a side note, his speech had an impact on me too in a very similar way. Like, there's all these speeches and they all sound pretty good, and it's like red meat to the crowd because we're all conservatives. But what his speech did was sort of focus your lens on what's important, cut through all the political nonsense and the people who are just spouting off nonsense to you because they know you're a conservative. And what actually is the foundation for all of this ideological agreement? And why should we look to yesterday to discover where we should go in the future? I think he made that case wonderfully, and it had an impact on me too. I'm just interested in why now the hierarchy of maybe a God-centered candidate than before.
Well, I think when you're thinking about who you're going to vote for, there's a lot of factors that come into play. So you have the two major categories are, hey, does this guy agree with me? Do the issues, do our views of the issues line up? And then quite often do you think about, can this guy win? Can this person win?
Yeah.
And that's a whole debate in itself about like which one of those two factors should weigh in the most. And I really feel like maybe I was originally had given a lot more weight to can the candidate win,
Right.
And so for me, I've been a big Rand Paul guy for a long time, and I've always been straightforward with people and said, listen, Rand Paul, out of all those famous candidates that we talk about, he's probably the guy I disagree with the most.
Likewise. Yeah.
The issues just don't line up nearly as much as with I don't know, Ben Carson, Rick Perry, you name it,
Yeah.
So, but for a long time I felt like, man, he is the guy that's going to get it done. The things that do line up with me and Rand Paul, I know for sure that
he's got salt. He's got salt. In other words, like 70% of the common ground, the Venn diagram or whatever that is, he's going to actually move on that stuff rather than just talk about it. And I can agree with you. That's the same reason his candidacy is appealing to me as well, because you actually buy into the fact that this guy's serious as opposed to one of these rhinos.
Exactly.
Right. But what are you thinking now?
But now, I gotta say, listening to Walker and listening to Ben Carson and even in the past, a few days, kind of like looking up some more stuff about these guys because I've started questioning, this vote again. I just really feel like, hey, these guys, a man that puts God first in his life, one, is a man who I know has his priorities in order.
Right.
And I just think that, Phil Robertson talked a lot about George Washington, and many people know that, George Washington didn't want to be the president of the United States.
Right.
When that all happened after the Constitutional Convention and everything, they came to him and they wanted to make him king, and he was like, no. And they decided to make him president. He was like, no, please don't give me that kind of power. I don't feel comfortable with that. And he was just being a really humble, honorable kind of guy,
Yeah.
And I've always admired that about him. And so it got me thinking, when Phil Robertson brought him up again, hey, who is that guy? All these other guys, it started making me question, like, why are they running for the presidency? Why are they, the big famous question, why is Jeb Bush running for the presidency?
Right.
I wrote that one especially. I mean, obviously, I don't know, but even some of the other guys, I'm like, man, why are you running? Why is Donald Trump running? I don't know.
Exactly.
Ben Carson, he was that guy. He was that George Washington. Ben Carson didn't, as far as I can tell, had no intentions of running for the presidency, and not.
No, and still to this day, he's like kicking and screaming. He's got all these action committees trying to drag him into the race, and the guy seems like if there's any way for him to get out of it, but he needs to see a man on the horizon that he can believe in. You know what I mean? He needs to see there's going to be somebody that's going to do this right, and I respect that. It's like, you and me are both military guys, and I think this is a great time for an analogy. When you're in the military, especially in boot camp, you don't want to leave. There's nothing but bad consequences. There's no good. It's all bad. But you really quickly also realize in boot camp how important leadership is, and if you don't have it, you suffer so greatly.
Right.
So a man can get to the point where he's like, look, I have no appetite for this, I have no lust for this, and I don't want to do it. But for the sake of my own life, my family's life, and my fellow, in this case, soldier or American, I'm just going to step up and do this and grit my teeth and get through it. And that is the guy you want at the reins of power. That is the guy.
Exactly.
Wears it lightly. Yep. I mean, and you're right. I mean, Carson has that thing going on. Now, here's the thing, to be intellectually honest. Now, I'm a Carson fan. The audience knows I'm a Carson fan. But I have to admit, there's three candidates right now that are really on my radar, and it's Carson, Rand Paul, and Scott Walker. And quickly, and I could really get excited about like a Rubio vice presidency as well. But nonetheless, so with these guys, they are all Christian men. And here's the most important thing. I believe them all to be actual Christian men. All these politicians are going to tell a 70% Christian nation that they're a Christian. But the last presidency has proven without a shadow of a doubt that is not always the case. And I know that everybody's thinking Barack Obama is a Muslim. I think he's an atheist. I think he's a godless atheist that worships at the feet of his own ego, personally. But nonetheless, if you're not a God-fearing man, look at Israel. Look at the stuff that's going on right now with Israel. You tell me a God-fearing man would do this? You tell me a God-fearing man that's leafing through the pages of God's Word would disrespect Israel like this? No way. No way that would happen. So there's just so many nuanced things that people don't think about. They think, I don't want to be a Jesus freak. No, it's what you just said beautifully. It's like, I know this guy's got his life in order. I know he's got his priorities in order. And once a guy has that, he can make good decisions about everything. That's like the way to look at it. And that's kind of like what you seem to be saying. It should be more important to us than we're making it.
Right. And obviously, there's countless examples in history, if you read the Bible about God, where God has brought up men. The Bible says God puts all men in power and in the positions of leadership in our countries and stuff. And there's countless examples of men that he brought up and men that honored him. He made prosper, whether they were natural born leaders or not, and men that, dishonored him, fared a different fate,
Moses being the most example, because people forget, if you read your word, he was basically mute. He was inarticulate. He was not, so that he farmed that stuff out to Aaron. But you're right. People just stood up, but he was a man who was obedient. Right. And that's all he was just obedient. Yeah. That's it. That's all the skills he had was obedience. And look at that situation. So well said. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up too another guy who I'm not sure exactly where he would be on my list right now if I had to write it down on paper, but a guy who definitely got bumped way up towards the top for me is Marco Rubio.
Yeah. Is he not? We live in a very verbal country. We live in a very soundbite nation, and the media cycle is just an evil that we all have to deal with in politics. And there really is nobody, in my opinion, on the political landscape of conservatism like Marco Rubio for articulating my type of conservatism and what I love about this nation. When that guy is talking, you're just like, you want to live in this country again. You want to fight for this country again. You want to raise your kids here again. And that's just an inspiring thing that the nation needs. And that's why I say, he took a couple beatdowns with the immigration stuff, but he could make a great VP candidate. And he would just blossom in that position, I think. Maybe being like a little bit of a PR agent for the White House, or you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, definitely.
He's young, so give him a chance to marinate,
Absolutely. And the other thing that I really like about him is he's so as smart and articulate as that guy is. There's something that's so regular guy about him.
Yeah, I agree.
He's the guy you're gonna have over and have a cup of coffee or a beer or whatever with, and just there's gonna be no pretentiousness or anything like that. He's just a normal dude.
He's a family man who just seems like he actually is actually. You know what I think of when I think of him? I actually think of an actual public servant, like somebody who is in politics because he actually thinks God gifted him in ways, and I would agree, God gifted him in certain ways, and he actually seriously does want to make things better. And you can't say, when you think of somebody like Nancy Pelosi or Harry Reid, do you think public servant? Do you think these people are waking up every day and saying, how can I make the lives of my constituents better? Or do you get the impression that these guys are self-serving as can be? And I think of that when I think of Rubio. I think of somebody that guy could be making millions of dollars on Wall Street. He's so bright. He has an Ivy League education. I mean, that guy could be killing it,
Yeah, totally agree, yeah. And even, I hate to say it, but even, some of the candidates on that Republican ticket, or that we presume will be on this Republican ticket coming up, I can't say that about. There's some guys that
I agree with you.
I thought gave really impressive speeches at CPAC. I thought Donald Trump, gave an impressive, or at least a speech that resonated with the crowd there.
I agree.
Heck, I thought Chris Christie, who's definitely not a conservative favorite, gave a great speech. But these guys are very politician-y to me,
Yeah, I agree.
I don't see myself having a cup of coffee with these guys,
You're right. No, well said, man. I didn't think about that. And what's important about what you just said is I think the average voter cares about that. I think that's an intangible thing that, you described it well. It's this thing you just kind of feel. You can't even, if somebody says, oh, why is that? It's hard to put your finger on that. But it's very similar to when you're navigating your own society and life, and you meet somebody and you just know whether you click or not. And you just know whether you trust or not. And whether somebody's being a snake oil salesman. And you're right, that's a big factor. And oftentimes I think Romney is a great example of a guy who just didn't have that. He just didn't have that. He was a nice guy, but he just didn't. There was no relatability to him. You didn't know anybody like him. He just didn't have it. I appreciate it, Rob. Thanks for spending time. We'll touch base, man.
All right, sounds good.
Hey, Mark, I said be quiet for a second. Everybody, this is little Billy Willie Clinton. That's right. You know me, I'm up to no good. Don't tell him the libtard. Shh. But I love that Brock Lawley. He's just fantastic. So why don't you head over to his Facebook page. He's got a bunch of great YouTube videos pushing back on all that nonsense I used to push from the bullet pulpit. That's right. Okay, sweetheart, go ahead and continue.